Hello everyone. In this episode I want to go over the IRS's Form SS4 application for EIN. Specifically I wanted to cover situations where you have a US company that was set up a non-resident. So it's someone that's obviously not living and working within the US. Perhaps they're a resident of Europe or Asia or South America, somewhere like that. So they don't have a U.S. Social Security number because they're not a U.S. citizen, nor do they have a U.S. ITIN, an individual taxpayer identification number. So if you're in a scenario where you have neither of those and you're trying to request an EIN for a new company, you're not able to use the IRS's online application system, right? So they have an online system where you can go in, if you have a U.S. company, you can enter the U.S. company information, address, fill everything out, and as the responsible party or the owner of the company, if you have an SSN or an ITIN, you can enter your information, and then they'll spit out an EIN for you immediately. If you don't have those tax ID numbers for yourself, then you're going to have to go through this process where you actually fill out the paper form and you print, sign, and mail it to the IRS, or you can print, sign, and then fax it to the IRS. So in this example, I want to use somebody that wants to launch an Amazon business, right? So they're selling some sort of product through Amazon's platform, and so they wanted to open a US LLC in order to do so. So I've created this example here. Amazon Business Wyoming LLC, so we're going to assume that this is a Wyoming LLC, and it's being set up by someone who's a resident of the UK, right? They live in London, for example. So we've used Winston Churchill down here, obviously deceased, not a real person, so it's just for purposes of this example. But so the first part of this form is relatively straightforward, right? You got the name of the LLC, the mailing address. A lot of persons are using U.S. mailing addresses for forwarding purposes because it's just so much easier. I mean, you can, like the IRS and other companies can mail stuff internationally, but the IRS is notoriously bad for mailing any kind of correspondence internationally. I've had clients that were sent notices saying they owed something, and it was sent overseas, and it took 2 months to get to them, which is just ridiculous, right? I mean, by that point you're already late on the notice, so everybody's obviously frustrated. So if you are going to set up a US LLC and you're a non-resident, I do recommend coming up or employing or hiring somebody in the US to run mail forwarding for you. It's just so much easier. So we've got a kind of fake Cheyenne, Wyoming mailing address down here. Line 6 we put it says county and state where principal business is located. Obviously, county and state is a U.S. kind of terminology, but if you're running your business overseas, you would just kind of use the city and country or district. That's fine. You could put down whatever is appropriate given your location there. The responsible party here for a single member LLC. In this case, it's generally going to be the owner, right? I mean, the 100% of the LLC is the owner. They're the managing member. They're responsible for everything. So you put down the name. You put down your full name, and then in 7B, this goes back to what I highlighted earlier, where if you're a non-resident, you don't have an SSN or an ITIN, that's fine. You can still get an EIN. If somebody tells you otherwise, they just don't know what they're talking about. So if you're a non-resident, you just put foreign down here. I've also seen some practitioners put NRA, meaning non-resident alien. Either one works. I just use foreign all the time, and that's very clear to the IRS agent that's processing this form that you are a non-resident, you don't have an SSN or an ITIN, so you can put foreign down here, and you should be good to go. 8A is the application for an LLC. Yes, in this case it's the Wyoming LLC. 8B, number of members, right? LLC owners are referred to as LLC members. In this case, we just have one. We have one person. And 8C is yes. This is an LLC organized in the United States. There are a number of countries that have LLC equivalents. I just helped set one up in Bermuda. Actually, the Bermuda has their own LLC legislation now, so they're kind of mirroring what Delaware did. So there are countries that will have LLCs, but in this case, this is an LLC organized in the US, so we're going with yes. So type of entity, this can get a little confusing for some persons, but in this case, if you have a single member LLC, the best approach, in my opinion, is indicate you're an other, right? So you're not a sole proprietor with an SSM, you're not a partnership because you don't have more than one member. So 2 or more members, it would be a partnership. You're not a corp because you're an LLC and you haven't filed any elections to be treated as a C Corp just yet. PSC, church, none of this applies. Estate, trust, and so on. So the best thing in this case that gives the IRS an indication as your tax status is, you are a foreign-owned U.S. disregarded entity, DRE, and you're going to be filing a Form 5472 form. So check out my other video on this issue, but every single member LLC that's foreign-owned, as of the end of 2016 or 17, I can't remember exactly when they passed the new rules, but every foreign-owned U.S. DRE has to file a Form 5472 each year if you have any reportable transactions. And that's reportable transaction now is so broad where it basically includes any kind of money moving back and forth. So the filing that the IRS can expect from a foreign-owned U.S. disregarded entity is a Form 5472. So if you write this down, that will suffice. That'll let them know that this is a foreign-owned U.S. LLC, and we're going to be filing this return or form, I should say, every year, unless you change the ownership structure or make some sort of entity classification election. 9B says if a corporation name, the state or foreign country are incorporated. So again, this form is kind of bad. This is incredibly misleading here, right? Because it suggests that you only complete this if it's a corporate entity, right? We have an LLC here, so why would I fill this out? You fill it out because when the IRS agents process this form, they have to enter a location where this LLC was created. And they cannot presume where the LLC was formed based on this information in 4A or 4B or 5A or 5B, right? So they can't assume that this is Wyoming LLC based on the information down here. So I always recommend indicating where was this set up. Even though it's an LLC and it's not incorporated, LLCs are organized under state statutes. Corporations are incorporated. Just enter where it was set up. So if you have a Wyoming LLC, enter Wyoming. If it's Delaware, Delaware. If it's Nevada, Nevada. And then foreign country, ignore that again. Just put United States of America. Make it very clear that this is a Wyoming LLC. And then, okay, so if we move on to 10, reason for applying. Pretty straightforward. Start a new business is okay. You can also indicate, in certain circumstances you might there might be withholding issues, right? So you might have gotten a request from, let's say, a U.S. customer or client, and they're worried about potential withholding tax. So you check this box because that's why you're getting an EIN, or even banking purposes. I mean, a lot of U.S. and non-U.S. companies have to get an EIN just for banking purposes. So that would also be appropriate, but you can't go wrong if you just say you started a new business. I mean, and that is in fact the case here, right? You're launching an LLC because you're starting an e-commerce business or some sort of equivalent through Amazon's platform. Okay, so line 11, date business started required. Just put the day the entity was organized down in here. So we're going to assume that this LLC was set up in Wyoming March 30th, 2020. So that's what I put down here. Closing month of the accounting year, by default, it's December, right? All U.S. entities are by default to calendar year end. You can put something different down in here if you want to, elect a different tax year. For foreign-owned U.S. disregarded LLCs, it's always going to be December. You've got to use that. But if let's say this was an entity where you were going to file an entity classification election to treat it as a corporation, and you wanted a June 30 year end. You could put June as the year end here in anticipation of filing that 8832. But for purposes of just getting the EIN, I would recommend just putting down December. Get the EIN, and then after the fact, complete your 8832 and file your your C Corp entity classification election, and then you can indicate that you want to be on a June year end. So deal with it then. But for purposes of this EIN application, I would just recommend putting down December. 13, highest number of employees, and 14, again, employee issues. 15. When you first start, just put zeros, unless you anticipate coming out the gate, having the actual hire employees instead of payroll. Just put zeros. The IRS will, again, the priority here is just to get the EIN. So get the EIN, and then tackle the issue with setting up payroll and doing all that if you need it. In most cases, these are these 100% owned LLCs that are running online, drop shipping or other kind of e-commerce businesses. They're doing everything themselves. You might have some subcontract labor, but for the most part, you don't have employees. So just put zeros. Okay, number 16, check the box that best describes the principal activity or business. Again, it's pretty self-explanatory. If you fall into one of these buckets, put down that. Otherwise, other, you can put e-commerce, online sales, whatever best describes your business. Again, it's not, it's not going to change the tax status or your filing obligations or anything. A lot of this is just designed to kind of collect, survey information for the IRS, just so they can kind of anticipate what kind of company is going to be, run here, what kind of activities are going to be conducted through the LLC. Line 18, has the entity shown in line 1 ever applied for and received an EIN? If this is a newly formed entity, obviously the answer is going to be no. In prior cases, you might have already been assigned an EIN, and that EIN was terminated or closed, and you need a new one. But 99.9% of the time, this checkbox is no, right? If you've got a new entity and you've never applied for an EIN before, don't hesitate on this question. Just put no. Okay, so this is your first time applying. If you're using a third party to help you complete this SS4, then you would put their name down here, name, contact details. If not, then you leave this blank, right? If you're doing it yourself, there is no third party designee, it's just you. So then on this line down here right below, you would indicate your name and title. So you could put, we would put Winston, if he's the owner of Winston Churchill, and then you should add, so it does say name and title. I should have the title after this, but it should say Winston Churchill, and then put managing member, right? So LLCs are, again, the owners of an LLC are members. The managing member is kind of the individual that owns the company or is an owner in the company and oversees all the operations. Very similar to a general partner in a partnership or a limited partnership structure, right? That general partner is kind of in charge of everything. So if you put your name, comma, and then managing member, that indicates to the IRS that you are the one that owns the company and you're authorized to, sign these types of documents and, apply for the tax ID number on behalf of the company. And you should also put your telephone number down in there and a fax number if you have it. Sign, date it, print it, and you can mail it or fax it to the IRS. The other thing I would highly recommend as well is, in addition to this one-page form, you should attach as a second page the articles of organization for the entity. Right, so when you set up a Wyoming LLC, they'll spit back the articles of organization and a certificate of organization as well. It's again one of those issues where it's not stated in the SS4 instructions that you need to provide that, but I have seen a number of these get returned where it's an agent by agent basis. Some people get really particular about seeing more supporting documents, and so I've seen some get returned where they want to see the articles of organization. So in an effort to just head that off and not have to worry about it getting returned, I would always recommend completing this form, attaching as a second page a copy of the Articles of Organization. Not a big deal, right? You just print it off, or if it's a PDF, fax that you're sending in, just add the second page with it in there, and then send that over. And that'll again further support that this is an actual business entity that was set up. And then again, line 9B here, where it was legally formed, right? If you provide the Wyoming Articles of Organization, this will be the supporting evidence you need to confirm what you've put down here on line 9B. So that'll help expedite the processing for your EIN. If you submit it via fax and you have a third-party designee, they generally send it back to this fax number down here. So you can expect the third-party designee to get a return confirmation. That what they do is they basically send this whole thing back and they handwrite in the top here the EIN. So just pray that you get an IRS agent that's got good handwriting, because I've seen some scribbled in there, and even I'm just trying to look at it, try to figure out what they wrote. But they will send it back that way. That's the quickest way to get it. And then after that, they'll send a CP 162 notice or whatever it is, a CP notice where they confirm, or they'll send you an EIN confirmation back. In a CPE notice that, okay, an EIN has been assigned to this entity, and it should match whatever you got back via fax up here in the top right. Okay, so I think that, so that covers everything I wanted to address on this form. If you have any questions, please leave a comment underneath the video. Happy to answer that way, or you can send me an email. Happy to respond to any of your questions and help out where I can. Again, thank you for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again. Thanks.